Good evening. I hope everyone is well and enjoy the Yontif. Okay. Because that it's been a while since we learned, so I want to just kind of revamp a little bit, rehash the machlokas Abaye v'Rava that we've been working on this entire time, especially since we have Leib with us now. I wanted to just pull everybody in. So we were working on the following question, which is as follows. What happens if a person A, loses his object? It has no siman on it. The example we've always used is a big pen. They make hundreds of thousands of these, if not more. They all look the same. There's no particular mark on it, so there's no siman on it. So he loses his big pen. Now, if he knows that he loses his big pen, he's miyayish immediately, because he's miyayish, meaning he gives up hope from ever getting it, because there's no way he's going to get it back. First of all, the finder has no way to identify whose it is. Second of all, even if the finder would somehow manage to do that, which is nearly impossible, but he has no way of proving that he was the one who lost it. Right? There's nothing, in other words, it's impossible to return it. Therefore, he's miyayish, he gives up hope. And therefore, the finder can keep it. Right? That's the halacha. If there's no siman, the finder can keep it because the owner is miyayish. Now, we had a machlokas, however, between Abaye v'Rava, which has been the mainstay of our Sugya, and that is, what happens if the loser, the owner, lost it, but he is unaware of it right now. He doesn't realize that he lost it. That's called Yeush, Shelo Mida'as. That's Yeush, but he doesn't know he's miyayish. Meaning, as we, in the very beginning of the Sugya, we set it out, this object, he's for sure going to be miyayish. Doesn't have a siman. There's no way. Would he know that he dropped it, he would certainly be miyayish. But he doesn't know that he dropped it yet. So he wasn't actually miyayish. It's potential Yeush without actual Yeush. So this is the point of contention between Abaye and Rava. Rava was of the opinion that that's okay, potential Yeush is good enough. Since he's going to be miyayish when he discovers that he lost his big pen, that's considered like he was miyayish already from the beginning. Abaye says, no, it's not true. You have to have actual Yeush. Potential Yeush is not sufficient. Okay? So, accordingly, it comes out like this. According to Abaye, when you come across an object that you find, you're walking down the street and you find an object. Can you take it? Well, offhand you would say no. Because even if the object does not have a siman, so therefore the owner is going to be miyayish for sure. But according to Abaye, you have to suspect perhaps that the owner has not yet discovered that it dropped from him. And in which case, he wasn't miyayish. According to Abaye, being as you have to have actual Yeush, not just potential Yeush. Therefore, when you, the finder, walk by and find this object, whatever it is, right? You find this watch on the ground, you find this pen on the ground, whatever it is you find, that would be Gezela if you take it. Because it still belongs to the original owner. He wasn't miyayish yet, because according to Abaye, potential Yeush is not sufficient. So even though he for sure will be miyayish as soon as he realizes that he dropped it, because there's no siman, but doesn't matter. Because according to Abaye, you haven't had Yeush yet. It still belongs to this other guy. When you, Mr. Finder, take it, You are stealing it, essentially, right? It's be'isura asal yadeh. It came to your hand in a forbidden manner. And being as it came in a forbidden manner, even after the guy was miyayesh, you cannot keep it. It's still bigzela. The original way that you got it was theft. Now, there were exceptions to that rule. If you remember, as we worked through the Sugya, we came out that there were exceptions to that. That is, for example, money. We said that if you find cash or coins, a person is asui lemashmesh bekiso. A person generally keeps track of his money. He feels his money in his pocket and stuff like that. And therefore, the Gemara had said that even according to Abaye, we can presume that by the time you, the finder, finds it, the owner already knows that he dropped it, right? Oh, the Muslim mashmesh bekiso. A person generally does, he feels his pockets to make sure his wallet is still there. If he's carrying cash, he'll make sure every few moments to touch his pocket to make sure it's still there. And therefore, at that point, you're allowed to keep it. So one exception to the rule was money, cash, right? That we said even Abaye held that you're allowed to keep it, assuming it has no siman, right? Okay. And that, by the way, parenthetically, bills, like if you find a dollar bill on the floor, right? Which happens from time to time. Are you allowed to keep it? The answer is yes. You are allowed to keep it, assuming that it does not have a siman. And serial numbers are not a siman, because nobody...
What about $20 bill?
Same thing. $20 bill? $20 bill. If it doesn't have a siman, there's no way.
Bill?
Even a $1,000 bill. Now, it's a Mida'as chasidus, to try to do it, try to find it, and try to find the owner. And if it's in a place where, from a Yidden, it's possible that, you can trust people, but it's a Mida'as chasidus. Halachically speaking, you're not obligated to return it. If you're lucky enough to find a $50 bill on the floor, you can keep it. Halachically speaking, you're allowed to keep it. Why? Because of what we just said. Because so a person will feel his pockets, and by the time you find it, the owner knows, or we can assume he knows, that he already lost it, and there's no way to prove that it's his. And like I said, even though that every bill has a serial number, nobody looks at the serial number. It's not normal for people to look in the serial number. Therefore, that's not considered a siman, even though technically it is, right? Technically, you could identify every single bill that ever came out of the treasury. But of course, that nobody looks at that. So therefore, that's not considered a siman. All right. We also said that if something was very valuable, we also said if something was heavy, and therefore a person would recognize that it fell out. Those are examples of where even Abaye would admit that you can assume that the owner already knows. But outside of that, if you find something, you find a big pen on the floor, you do not have the right to assume that the owner was miyayesh actually already, unless it becomes obvious that it's been a long time. Let's say it's, you see it's sitting there in the mud for a long time or something like that. Then already But if you just find it on the floor, you can't assume that. Yes, Leib, you had a question?
What's considered a sufficient siman for the purpose of, on cash money, for example? What would be considered, I have two questions. So one, what would be sufficient siman, and then practically, I don't think I've ever seen anybody do this. Does anyone actually apply a siman on paper money today?
You could have a number of different. What would be? Leib wanted to know what would be a sufficient siman. I've been saying that money does not have a siman, and what would be a sufficient siman? So there are a couple of possible sufficient simans. If you're willing to do a misdemeanor and write something on a bill, deface the bill, which is, I understand, a misdemeanor. You're not allowed to do that. But people do it. Right or wrong, but people do it. right?
Bank tellers do it. They write 15, like 20. They write numbers.
They do it on the bill in actual ink. I never saw them do that, but it's possible. I know that they have a thing that they have a way of checking whether it's counterfeit or not, but that's not actual ink. Whatever it is, if you're willing to deface a bill, which is technically forbidden, then you can put a siman that way because it's not, that there's a mark there. You can also fold the bill in a unique way, and therefore that would also be, if you would find a $20 bill on the floor folded in a triangle, okay, that's a siman, okay. That's just an example. Okay, now. Let's get further along. That is true. What we've said until now has been basically Abaye. According to Rava holds that potentially Yeush is good enough. And that is, put in simple English, that means, since you're gonna be miyayish later on, and that's a definite because there's no siman, therefore it is as if you were miyayish already, because you're going to be miyayish. There's definite going to be miyayish. So Rava says, we look at it as if he's miyayish already. Potentially Yeush is sufficient to enable a person to be able to take the object. So therefore, put simply, when you walk down the street and you find something, you find a big pen on the floor, are you allowed to keep it? The answer to that would be, it should be a machlokas between Abaye and Rava, right? According to Abaye, as we said, the answer would be no, you cannot keep that, right? Being as I have no way of knowing that the owner knew about it, right? Knew that it fell, therefore was not necessarily miyayish, and therefore you might not be able to keep it, right? It might still be his halachically. Whereas according to Rava, you could be able to keep it. Good? So far, so good? Good. Okay. The Gemara, this is a famous Sugya, and the Gemara has been trying back and forth already numerous times to try to prove whether Abaye is right or Rava is right. And so far, unsuccessfully. The Gemara has not conclusively proven, even though that we got pretty close sometimes, but the Gemara has not given a conclusive proof as of yet. We are about to start part 12, which is Chav Beis Amud Aleph all the way on the bottom. In order for us to learn this sugya, though, I believe that a little bit of a intro would be in order to appreciate this piece of Gemara. It's something which a lot of people are not that familiar with. It has to do with Hilchas Tumah and Tara. And Hilchas Tumah and Tara is, as soon as people mention Tumah and Tara, they get a psychological barrier because they say, oh my, Tumah and Tara, right? I don't know about that stuff, right? And they get the EBGBs about it. So let's make sure that we got this. Some of this, and this is going to be Tumah and Tara 101. Okay. There's a halacha that's called Heksher Zroim. Heksher Zroim means as follows, or Heksher Ochel. You have something which is edible, okay? Let's say it's the pasuk uses the example of wheat. Let's say you have wheat kernels, okay? They're harvested already, and you've collected them into some sort of container. Let's say one of these baskets. Okay, fine. Surprisingly, the Torah says that is not considered makabel tumah. Even though that food normally can be makabel tumah, can accept tumah, and if something tameh touches that food, it can become tameh. For example, let's say the context in which the Torah is talking about is a sheretz, a dead sheretz. A sheretz, there are 8 types of sheratzim that, even though they're not big animals, they become tameh. They are tameh when they're dead. being as the Torah calls them by name, but it's hard to identify exactly what they are nowadays. One of them is an achbar, which we can pretty surely identify as a mouse or a rat. So that one, we'll use that as an example, even though there are 7 others. There seems to be a salamander and a gecko and there might be others as well, but okay, let's keep it to a mouse. Makes it easy. So if you find a dead mouse, and the dead mouse is somehow in contact with my wheat kernels, is it tamei? Would the wheat kernels become tamei? The answer? Arousing, it depends. Okay, now ordinarily speaking, yeah, why not? I mean, you've got something which is edible, food. Food can become tamei. You got something which is an av hatumah, which is something called a father of tumah. A father of tumah just simply means that it can transmit tumah to something else, right? Like a father can have a child, so too this is an av hatumah, so it can have a child. It can make something else tamei. That's all. That's what an av hatumah means. Okay. So you got everything you need, right? You've got your sheretz, your dead sheretz, which is an av hatumah. You got your wheat kernels, which is a food. No. You got something that can transmit tumah, and you got something that can accept tumah. Why shouldn't it become tamei?
By the way, is it just the kernels that are touching the rat, or is it the whole pot?
Okay, that's just the ones that are touching the rat. Yeah, normally. Depends on, it sort of depends. Okay. Depends on if it's in a klicheres. Okay, I don't want to get into other areas. Now, but the Torah surprisingly makes one catch. The catch is called hechsher zroim or hechsher oichlin. You have to prepare it. Hechsher. You have to make it kosher. How do you prepare it? How do you make it kosher? So the Torah has the following pasuk. The Torah says, if you have a dead sheretz that touches wheat kernels and something like that, it's not tamei. However, and I draw your attention to this pasuk over here, the pasuk says, however, v'chiyutan, note how that is spelled and how it is read. Yutan, it's spelled yud taf nun, but instead of, even though that without nekudot, you would probably read that yitain, but with nekudot, the proper way to read it, and of course the way we do read it when we lane, is yutan. If water, yutan mayim al zera, and when water is placed or put on zera, on seed, such as wheat kernels, then afal minivlo sam alav, and then their dead carcass, that means of the shrotzim, the dead mouse's carcass, touches it, tamei, it becomes tamei. Okay? So here, the Torah is telling you the following rule. And that is that even though you have something which is edible, it's wheat kernels, it's edible, you need one catch, one hechsher, you have to prepare it by putting water on it. In other words, it has to come into contact with water, and only then is it tamei. Why? Because it has to be washed first. Somehow it has to be washed, at least somewhat. Otherwise, it's not considered like it's prepared to be used for food, because you wouldn't use unwashed. You wouldn't just use completely raw, straight from the field. You would wash the kernels first before you would grind them or something like that. Therefore, that's you have to wash it first. It has to be washed at least a little bit in order for it to be considered mukshar lekabel tumah, prepared to accept tumah. That's the rule. Okay, that's the pasuk. And when water is placed on zera, then it becomes tamei. Okay, now we're going to learn in this upcoming brisa, which is going to be part 12. We're going to learn in this upcoming brisa that there's going to be not just a clause of you have to put water on it, but the water has to be placed in a manner by which that the owner is happy that it's there. He washed it, and now he's happy that it got washed. He's happy that it happened. If he wasn't happy with it, if he would have preferred that it not happen, then it's not considered tamei yet. Okay, we're going to learn that. You wouldn't see that from the pasuk directly, because the pasuk doesn't say anything about the owner wanting it. So we'll have to learn where you got that, where the Brisa gets that from. But the Brisa does say that not only do you need the clause of having the water placed on it and washing it a little bit, but you also need another clause, and that is that he's happy that he was pleased that the water got on it. Okay? Either he did it himself or somehow it got on there, but he was pleased that it happened. Okay? Good? So far, so good? Everybody's clean? Okay, let's go. Now let's see. Now we're going to get into this, and we're eventually going to see how this is going to be relevant to the machlokas between Abaye and Rava. But for right now, let's ignore Abaye and Rava for a few minutes, and let's just learn the halachas that's being said in this brisa. Tashma. Everybody with me? Yeah? Tashma, come in here. A proof. So right now we're just going to learn a brisa. Odeyu atal aleihem. If the tal, the dew, is still upon them, meaning the dew fell, let's say a person took his wheat kernels outside and he left it in a place which was open to the air, wasn't covered by a roof or something like that. And the morning came, and the climate was right, and the situation was right, and came dew, and dew fell upon this basket of wheat. Okay. So the Mishnah, the Brisa says as follows: Odehu hatal alein. If the tal, the dew, is still upon them, Odehu means like ode. It's still there. Odeyu atal aleim. The tal is still there, which means it's still damp. The dew made the kernels damp, and it's still there. It hasn't dried up yet. V'samach, and he was happy. The owner walks out. He wakes up at 7 o'clock in the morning. And it's a little chilly outside, and he comes out, oh, look at that, it's a nice dew. And then he sees his basket with the wheat kernels, and he sees that that it got wet from the dew. And he was happy with that. V'samach, he was pleased. How do you like that? God washed my wheat kernels for me. Hareza. You'll excuse those, if you're using this, there was a mistake. The parentheses are supposed to be not going out, they're supposed to be going in. It's supposed to be around by Yikra Yud Aleph. You'll excuse me, that's a misprint. Okay? This is considered bechiyutan. That is considered this pasuk. Meaning it is considered chiyutan zera, mayim al zera, that water is placed on the seed and it makes it tamei. Okay? So the Brisa is stating as follows. It was natural. He didn't lift a finger. He did not wash his wheat kernels. It happened naturally through dew. That's fine. As long as he was happy and it was still wet from the dew, and he was happy while it was still wet that it would have happened. Says the Brisa, that's bechiyutan. That's considered chiyutan. When it says that is bechiyutan, that means it's still within the context of kiyutan, which is just a reference to that pasuk. This pasuk is saying that such a thing is tamei, and therefore that's considered tamei. Good? However, the Brisa continues, nagvu. What happens if it dried up? What happens if by the time he gets up, it's already 10:30 in the morning, and by 10:30 in the morning the sun has come out and the dew has already dried up. Afal pisha samach, even though that he was happy, meaning even though that he somehow realized that a dew had fallen and had washed his wheat, but meanwhile he's already after the fact. By the time he got around to it, by the time he found out about it, it was already dried up. Sorry, enan b'chiyutan. They're not b'chiyutan. That is not a fulfillment of the pasuk of kiyutan, which means, in other words, that does not qualify as the water has now been placed on these seeds and now has made them food to the point where they can accept tumah. Nope. It's not makabel tumah. It's not food yet. It's not considered makabel tumah. It is not bechiyutan, which means you have not fulfilled this pasuk of kiyutan mayim alzara. Good? That's the end of the brisa. That's the whole brisa. So I'm sorry?
What would the agricultural reason be that a person would be happy that there was dew on this?
Because it rinsed them off a little bit. It made them fresher. It makes it not as dry, things like that. Now, okay, so summary of the brisa in a nutshell is that the brisa is telling you you don't have to put on the water yourself, right? As the pasuk implies, when water is placed on it, that doesn't mean it doesn't say yitain mayim, it doesn't mean he has to put it on. Even if it happens naturally through dew, that's fine. But provided that A, he's happy with it, and B, that he was happy with it when it was still wet. Right? Those are the catches. He has to be pleased that it happened, and it has to happen that he was pleased when it was still wet with the dew. But the Bryce is saying, even if you're happy with it, but if you only ended up being happy after the fact, if the dew already dried up by then, by the time it was 10:30 a.m. and by the time you found out that the dew had fallen, it was already after the fact. No, it's not. That's not considered b'chiyutan, and it's not moksher l'kabel tumah. That is not considered proper to makabel tumah yet. Right? Good. So far, so good. That's what. Okay. Now the Brisa doesn't really tell you exactly how the Brisa knows that. The Brisa is just telling you halacha, and we're going to have to figure out why that is. Okay. Hopefully, in the upcoming Gemara, we'll figure it out. That's the whole Brisa. Now the Gemara says, but without going into great detail about the reasons for this. But it's clear from the Brisa that even though that afterwards at 10:30 or 11 o'clock a.m., that when you found out that a dew fell on your wheat kernels, you were happy. Doesn't help. It doesn't help to say, oh, well, being as you were happy then, it's as if that you were happy to begin with. You don't say that, right? You don't assume that just because it was happy before, just because that you're going to be happy later, does that mean that it's the same thing as if you're happy already? Correct? You don't say that. So the Gemara makes that deduction. Time amai. The reason is why. Why is that? He's referring to the last part of the Brisa. Why is it that if it dried out first and only then you were happy about it? How come that's not Mekabel Tumah? Lav Mishum. Isn't it because, Lav Mishum means, that's a negative. Is it not because, Delo Amrinan, that you don't say, Kivan de Igloi Milsa? Since Igloi Milsa means that it becomes revealed, the thing becomes revealed. Milsa, in this context, can mean word, but it means revealed the thing. Igloi milsa, that the thing becomes revealed. The hashta nichale, that now he's happy. Meikara nami, from the beginning also, nichale. He was happy. So I'll just translate that again. You don't say, since in the end he's going to eventually, it's going to be clear that he is happy for it with it. You presume it as if it was retroactive and that he would have been happy from the beginning. You don't say that. Again, the Brisa is clear that it has to be still wet in order for it to become tameh when he is happy, right? He's happy that the dew fell on it. Great, provided that it's still wet. That's what the Brisa said. As soon as it dries up, that's it. Even though he's happy that the dew fell on it earlier, but if it's already dried up, it doesn't help anymore. Now, why not? Why doesn't it help retroactively? I mean, why don't you say, according to Rava, l'chayro, I should say, well, being as he's going to be happy later on, at 11 o'clock when he figured out that there was a dew and he said, oh yeah, well, that's nice. God washed my wheat kernels for me, right? How come you don't say, well, being as he was happy later, that's as if retroactively that he was happy from before. You don't say that, right? Clearly from the Brisa, you don't say that. Oh. Says the Gemara. Well, just a second. Why not? Doesn't Rava hold that a person's das, a person's mind, if he is going to be miyayish later on, it's as if that he was miyayish from before, right? Rava says that potential Yeush is good enough, right? Being as in the end he's going to end up being miyayish, it's as if that he was miyayish from before. And therefore when this thing is on the floor, I may keep it, I the finder may keep it, because even though that the owner hasn't actively been miyayish, but since he's going to be miyayish, it's as if that he was miyayish already. Doesn't Rava hold like that? Which means that we are projecting and saying, well, in the future he's going to be miyayish when he finds out, so therefore it's as if that he was miyayish now. Well, if Rava can project that way when it comes to Yeush, when it comes to a lost object, why don't we say the same idea over by Hechsher Tumah and say, well, can't I project in a couple hours from now, he's going to wake up, he's going to see that there was a tal, there was dew. He was going to be happy then, so why don't I just say, well, project. Just like he was happy later on, so it's as if that he was happy from the beginning. Yes?
Okay, so this point about the consistency of these 2 points this has to do with Svara, right? This is not dealing with, because it has nothing to do with a pasuk. It's not the there.
Right.
So this is by way of Svara. If he holds A, then B.
Excellent. That is exactly correct. Okay, what the Gemara is a master of doing is, the Gemara, you'll see this all the time. And this became famous with Reb Chaim Brisker, by the way, right? But it wasn't Reb Chaim Brisker's invention, even though he made it famous, but it's a Gemara. The Gemara does it all the time. And that is, the Gemara says, if you tell me a svara, if you tell me there's a logic, there's a concept like this logically, so then it has to be universally true, right? If there's a logic that says do this here and this logic is here, so then it should be applicable anywhere. That same concept, the same logic, right? Which should make perfect sense. So just because that a minute ago we were talking about the laws of finding a lost object, and now we're talking about the laws of Tumah and Tara, it doesn't make any difference. A concept is a concept. A logic is a logic, right? If you're going to tell me that I can project and say, well, if he's if he's going to be miyayish later on, it's as if that he's miyayish now. So if he's going to be happy later on, it should be that he's happy now. The same concept should hold true, unless you can tell me a difference, which is what the Gemara is going to try to do. But that basically is, you find this concept all over the place in the Gemara. The Gemara does this all the time.
What's that called in the Gemara? Is that a binyan av? Is that a...
No, it's not a binyan av. Binyan av is when, it's a similar idea. Binyan av is when the pasuk, when the Torah tells you a certain concept, you apply it to every place else unless you can differentiate, unless you can tell me why it should be applied over here and not over there.
What is that called, that application? Is it called something?
That's called binyan av, or a mematzinu. Mematzinu, binyan av, the same thing. Right? If I find here, I assume it's there, right?
So is that what
it's not a binyan av, because a binyan av is from a pasuk. This is a svara. This is a logic. Logic says that if I find it over here, I can find it over here. Lawyers do it all the time, right?
Is that svara called something? Is that...
yeah, it's logic application. I'm not sure exactly. Yeah.
I don't know if it's a kasha, but is it that the issue is, well, the opinions are not internally consistent, so the attack is on the person offering the opinion, or is it that it seems that the way that the Rav is explaining it, it's that the person's interpretation of the Torah is not consistent. So it's that we believe that the Torah should be consistent, because I feel like the attack here is most directly on the svara of the individual and their understanding of the Torah. But then the way that the Rav is explaining it was that. Does that make sense? Those 2 points.
I think I understand what you mean. Yeah. So the Gemara is asking on Rava, who held this svara.
Right.
Okay. Now we are finding that svara is inconsistent, apparently, over here in this application of Tumah. So in the laws of Tumah, we see that the logic that Rava employs when it comes to lost objects doesn't seem to flow over here. And therefore, we're finding an inconsistency in the svara. And therefore, we're asking, well, hey, if you're going to hold of a svara, it should apply, right? A svara is a svara. Unless you can tell me a reason why there's a differentiation, it should apply.
We're asking on Rava now.
We're asking on Rava, right? We're asking a question on Rava that, hey, if you can project and say, since he's going to be happy later on, he should be happy now. Just like if he's going to be miyayish later on, it's as if that he was miyayish now. Same thing.
But I can think of a major nafkamina between those 2 cases. Can't we all?
What's the difference?
Can anybody, if we're going to think outside the box, sitting in this chair, right? Let's ask the question. Let's ask Rabbi Englander the question. There's a major difference between the principle of Yeush Shalom Mida'as prospectively than there is over here, which is what? Isn't there a major difference between this?
Go on, speak out. Yeah.
No, anybody? What's the difference? When you're talking about Yeush Shalom Mida'as prospectively, so he lost it now and he's going to be miyayish. Here in this case, it's retroactive. It's, now I know that I would have been in the past.
Okay.
I would have been in the past happy when it was, but I didn't know about it. I didn't know about it then.
Yeah.
So now we're saying that Yeush Shalom Mida'as goes backwards.
Okay. So right. Okay.
It's a major difference between the
Okay. Good. Okay. Very good. Okay. Very good. Yeah. So the Mefarshim talk about this. This Gemara again seems to imply, we've had this a little bit before, that this Gemara seems to imply that Rava's logic is based on retroactivity. That being as we know he's going to miyayish later, therefore it works retroactively. Now, that was not so clear in the beginning. In the beginning, we had understood it, like Rabbi Roll just finished saying, that in the beginning we understood it that not so much because we know later on and it works retroactively. Rather, it's like, it's 100% certain that he was going to miyayish. He's just missing one point, and that is that he doesn't know yet. So it's, the Mefarshim talk about this. This is a big big point of discussion amongst the Achronim in this sugya. I don't want to get into too much in detail about this because it really that's a very lumdisha type of difference. Okay, but let's leave that for a minute. Right now, let's keep to the point. Right now, the Gemara is asking a question that the logic doesn't seem to apply. The Rava's logic doesn't seem to apply over here to Tumah.
I just want to, as a principal question. So, there's an inherent assumption in our previous discussion. Do we believe the Torah is internally consistent? Is that fair? That's accurate.
Yes.
Okay. The Torah is internally consistent. Therefore, that's why the kasha is on the what's proper, because that's where the issue is. Because I think I follow.
Okay. Yes. And if Rava says that it happens over there by Yeush that way, so then we should apply the same thing. Unless you can tell me a difference, then you should apply the same thing. Okay. Okay. So that's the Gemara's question. So the Gemara is actually going to tell you why that there is a difference. Shani Hasam. It's different over there. By Tumah, it's different. Dichsiv, because it says, Ki Yitain. When he gives it, Ad Sheyitain, until he gives it. Now, I don't have it in these formatted things here. When I read that Gemara, I said, "Huh?" Over here it says Kiyitain. I thought it said Kiyutan. I have no idea what this is talking about. So I immediately used my secret weapon. No, it wasn't Art Scroll. My secret weapon is Rashi. I always, when I'm giving class to my high school boys, I always joke as if I say, "Oh, I run into this Gemara." I say, "What? What on earth does this Gemara mean?" So I quickly shot Rashi an email, and I said, "Rashi, can you please explain to me what's going on in this Gemara?" And then he responds, "Englander, I knew you would not understand this Gemara. So I was ready for your question. So just listen to me and I'll help you through it." I was anticipating you asking me that. Right? So Rashi and me were tight. But I didn't put it on here because when we go further on into the Sugyas, we're going to get into the Rashis. But Rashi explains what's going on over here. Thank God for Rashi. Rashi says as follows. What it means is like this. Let's go back to our pasuk. You will notice that the pasuk says V'chi Yutan, but it's spelled without a vav. If you look in the pasuk, if you look in the Chumash, it's spelled Yud Tov Nun. Now, if it was Yutan, which is the way that it's pronounced, it's the way that it's vowelized as Yutan. The Chiyutan would ordinarily be spelled with a vav, but it's not spelled with a vav. It's spelled Yud Tov Nun, which would ordinarily yield Yitain. Okay? This is what's known as a Kriyu Ksiv. A Kriyu Ksiv means it's read one way, but it's written another way. Okay? Now, so the Gemara is saying as follows. Over here is different because it says Ki Yitain, meaning that the pasuk, albeit that we read it Yutan, but it says Yitain. It's written Yitain. What's the difference between Yutan and Yitain? So if you have a little bit of grammatical background in Hebrew, you will know the differences as follows. Yitain means he gives. Ki yitain would mean when he puts the water on. Ki yitain mayim al zera means he, the owner, puts the water on the al zera, on the kernels. Yutan means is placed, is put. Doesn't have to be him. The chiyutan would mean when water is placed on that. It doesn't mean he put it. It can be from other places as well. Okay? That's the grammatical difference between yitain versus yutan. So the Gemara says, over here it says dichsiv because it says ki yitain. It says yitain. Now that's not how we read it. We read it yutan, but it's written yitain. Ad sheyitain, until he actually puts it. So the Gemara is answering as follows. Yes, you're correct. That logic would dictate that, according to Rava, if I know what's going to end up later on, I should be able to say it already, right? If he's going to be happy later on with the water having washed his fruit, his stuff, that should make it that it's already good already. Why is it that it's no good if it already dried? That was the question. To which the Gemara answers, yeah, but you're forgetting that it says yitain. He has to put it. He didn't put it. It fell on it by itself. And therefore it's no good. He has to put it on. And he didn't put it on. It fell on by itself. So the Gemara, I'm sure you're about to ask, what? What on earth? Ihachi, if so. Reishanami. Then the first part of the brisa also. Huh? The Gemara says, you mean he has to put it on? But the first part of the brisa said very clearly that tal, dew, that fell on it, as long as it is still wet, that makes it tamei. As long as it's happy with it still wet, it makes it tamei. Hey, he didn't put it on. That God did. I thought you just told me that he has to put it on. Huh? Something's wrong here, right? What's going on over here? You just told me that he has to put it on. Oh, if he doesn't put it on, that's why it's no good. What do you mean? He doesn't have to put it on. Look at the beginning of the brisa. You don't have to put it on. What are you talking about? So the Gemara says, listen closely. Hassam, over there, kid of Rav Papa. It's like that of Rav Papa. The Rav Papa Rami. The Rav Papa Rami means asks a contradiction.
Over there where? Hassam?
Hassam over there in the brisa, in the first part of the brisa. First part of the brisa is like that of Rav Papa. That Rav Papa Rami, Rav Papa asks a contradiction. It's written kiyitain. When he puts it, he has to put it. That's how it's written. The karinan, but we read it kiyutan, as if it had a vav. We read it when it is put. Now there's a little bit of a steer there. The ksiv, the way it's written, the writ, would imply he has to put it. And if he doesn't put it on, it's no good. If it fell from the shamayim through dew, not good enough. It will not make it worthy of being mekabel tumah. But on the other hand, it says we read it kiyutan. Kiyutan would imply it is placed, which implies as long as it got there somehow, it's good enough. So ask Rav Papa, well, what is it? Is it kiyitain or is it kiyutan? Which one is it? So the right, ha-ketzad. This, how is it? In other words, how do you reconcile these two things? The kri and the ksiv, right? We are trying to reconcile the two. We should not say that there is a contradiction between the two, and we try to reconcile them. So Rav Papa says like this, ha-ketzad, how is this? Boinan, you need kiyutan? you need the kiyutan dumya similar to lo kiyitain. You need the kiyutan, it should be similar to the kiyitain. Meaning, you need when it comes from some other source, let's say shamayim, as in dew, that has to be similar to when he puts it on. Kiyitain. The kiyutan, when it's placed from someplace else, from shamayim, has to be similar to when he puts it on. And in what way is it similar? Ma'yitain, just like when he puts it on, it's ladas. It's with his knowledge, he understands it, obviously, because he's doing it. Even kiyutan, even when it is kiyutan, when it is given from elsewhere, such as dew, nami ladas. It also has to be with intention, with knowledge. Now we'll go back and understand this Gemara. But first, let's make sure we got Rav Papa straight. Rav Papa says this contradiction / answer. He started out with a contradiction. On one hand, it says he has to put it on. That's the way it's written. Kiyitain, he has to put it on. On the other hand, we read it kiyutan when it is placed, which implies that somebody else, or for that matter, God, could put it on and also be machshir l'kabel tuma. It could also prepare it for being l'kabel tuma. So what is it? So the Gemara answers, they're both true, but they have to be similar. It can be somebody else, it can be him, but they have to be similar. How are they similar? Just like when he puts it on, if he washes the kernels himself, that's obviously ladas, that's obviously with his knowledge, he understands it, right? So when kiyutan, when God washes it or some other person washes it, that also has to be with his knowledge. It has to be with his understanding and knowledge that it's happening. Okay. Now, let's go back. What we just established was that when it happens from someplace else, that's kiyutan, it could work, provided that the owner knows and is aware of it happening. As it happens. Because kiyutan has to be dumya, similar to kiyitain. Just like kiyitain, he is aware of it when he's doing it, so too kiyutan, he has to be aware of it when he's doing it. Okay? Now, dew falls through the course of the night. He wakes up at 7 o'clock in the morning, the dew is still there. And he's happy. He's pleased with it. It works. Because there, the kiyitain is fulfilled. Meaning, he didn't do it, so it's not actually kiyitain. He didn't put the dew on it. That happened from God.
It's kiyutan.
But it's kiyutan, but it is dumya to kiyitain.
Why?
Because
He wakes up and finds
he finds it, but while it is still wet, the Bryce is saying that's considered. He didn't have to be the moment that it fell on it, but it has to be still wet. Well, it's still wet. He saw it. He was pleased with it. That is considered kiyutan, which is similar to a kiyitain, and therefore that's makabel tuma. However, when he wakes up at 11 o'clock in the morning and it's already dry and he realizes that there was a dew that fell that night, and if he would have waken up a few hours earlier, he would have seen it. But meanwhile, he didn't, right? Oh, yes, says Rava. Logic should dictate that, yes, I should be able to say, well, if he was happy before, if he's happy later, he should be happy before. Yeah, right? That was our question. Says the Gemara, yeah, but you're missing one point. Tuma is different because it has to be similar to kiyitain. The halacha of hechsher zroim, of making something muksher, prepared to mekabel tuma, requires a condition that says, if it comes from someplace else, if it's a kiyutan, it has to be similar to a kiyitain. And therefore, the kiyitain says he has to put it on. Now, it doesn't have to be he has to physically put it on because there's a kiyutan. It can be put on by somebody else, in this case, God, right? But it has to be similar to the kiyitain in the respect that it has to be with his knowledge and he's happy with it when it is there. So if he wakes up later, even though that maybe logic should dictate that I should project and say, according to Rava, well, he was happy later, it's as if that he was happy before, maybe logic would dictate that. Yeah, but it doesn't work over here because there's a special gzeras hakosov, there's a special law that says when it comes to the preparing of food, it has to be a kiyitain similar to a kiyutan. Got it? So that's what the Gemara originally said. The Gemara said it, but you see the Gemara needed a lot of explanation. The Gemara, when the Gemara first answered the news, Shani Awesome, it's different over there, because it says kiyitain. It says kiyitain. Ajit, until he puts it. So the Gemara says, huh? What are you talking about? He doesn't have to put it. So the Gemara says, hey, let me explain. The Gemara didn't go off the deep end. The Gemara just didn't get a chance to explain itself. So the Gemara, it's like sometimes you speak to somebody. I know I had a Rebbe like that, Rabbi Weinberg, right? Who was always 10 steps ahead of everybody. So you would ask him a question, he would say something, and what? And then it would take, because he was, 10 steps out of everybody. So therefore it took him a little while to explain why his answer answered you. You didn't catch it first, right? Because you were still on step 1, he was already on step 10. So that's what the Gemara says. Over here it's different because it's kiyitain. The Gemara says, what? It doesn't have to be kiyitain. Let me explain what I mean. Right? Now, once you figured out, you bring in a Rav Papa, and then you understand kiyutan is similar to kiyitain. Now I got it. Now you understand the whole deal. So, in short, what's happening here is that the Gemara is saying perhaps that logic may dictate, according to Rava, that you should be able to say if he's happy later, it should be as if that he was happy before. Maybe logic should dictate that way. That's true. However, over here, there's a gzeiras hakosov, there's a halacha in the written Torah, that says that the laws of Tumah require that he should be happy while he is putting it on, or as when it's on. That's the kiyitain, similar to the kiyutan, and therefore it doesn't work over here. But it's only because of the gzeiras hakosov of the comparison of the kiyitain and the kiyutan. Clear? Yes, sir.
Rabbi, in this instance, so we're saying that the halacha is more significant than the outcome that would come by way of svara. How does that reconcile with, I've heard it said before that svara is actually stronger than, I don't know if it's maybe by way of pesukim, those kinds of things.
What that means is if I have something which is a svara, right? If I have something which is a svara, I don't need a pasuk to tell me something. I don't need a pasuk that tells me 2 + 2 is 4. Okay? Because I can figure that out myself. But if a pasuk tells you something, then that means the Torah tells you that this is the rule. Maybe I wouldn't have come up with that with svara, but that's what the Torah is now telling you. Right? So quite the contrary. The Torah doesn't tell you things that you would understand yourself, generally. Right? And if it does, there must be a reason why I told you that. Okay? But if the Torah now tells you a certain halacha, be it directly or as like in this case through a drasha and indirectly, but if this is what the Torah is telling you, that means that this is what the Torah is now telling you. Svara is now, that means that the Torah is telling you that the laws of Haksher Tumah, right? Haksher Ochlin, do not abide by the same rules that the halachas of Yeush, for example, would work. Okay? Clear? Okay. Gentlemen?
The Kriya Ksiv that's comparable here by Rav Papa, does that apply across the board?
Yes. Generally speaking, we want to reconcile. You find it in other places in the Gemara.
So the Kriya Ksiv has to be similar to each other.
We try to do that. Now, Tosas in some other places, not here, but Tosas in some other places, the Gemara talks about that sometimes it's a machlokas whether you put the kriv, the most important, or the ksiv. If you don't reconcile them, what do you do? Which one is more important? But if you could reconcile them, that's the best way of doing it.